Welcome to the presentation of the new monitoring setup. Okay, so over the past of the course of the last year, Atlas team has been building the new monitoring setup, and that's what I'm gonna present here. So to start, I'm gonna start with the old setup that we're mostly all familiar with. And so this helps to explain where we're coming from and why we've changed that. So in the old setup, we basically had one Prometheus server per installation. And this Prometheus server was in charge of scraping and gathering data from all the cluster of the installation, also including the control plane. And then with that come a Grafana server dashboard where you can visualize all the data which are in Prometheus. Based on those data, there is a set of alerts in Prometheus that each team define, and whenever the mass says something is wrong, the alert fires. Prometheus send that to Alert Manager, and people get notified via Opgenie or Slack. Additionally, there is also, we send some of this data to Cortex, which is basically a cloud-hosted Grafana. We don't send everything because this costs money, but we send some of the data there, and that's kind of the central place where we can visualize everything. So why we moved away from this setup was because we had a lot of scalability issues with that. Basically, because we have this single point of failure, which is this single Prometheus, means the more cluster you're observing and the larger the cluster, the more metrics you have. And Prometheus is quite intensive in terms of resource usage, especially memory. So we often saw cases where a Prometheus would fill up entire nodes because there were so many data to ingest that it would just explode. So this was one of the biggest issues we had. And this made it very hard to scale, and it was very hard to live with that. So we decided to go with the new setup. And the main change in the new setup is that we got rid of this giant single Prometheus, and we do now have one Prometheus server per cluster. And with this, we get a lot of benefits, because this means each Prometheus server is scraping one tenant cluster, so you're scraping less data. The Prometheus server is smaller, use less resources, so it's way easier to schedule that around the control plane. And this might not be perfect because we might have other issues in the future where when we start having more cluster, bigger cluster issues can happen. But with this, we're much more confident because we can make changes. We're flexible and we can just do stuff, while before we had this giant pod that was just very hard to handle. Yeah, so what also changed is that there is this small Prometheus app that's in front of the Prometheus. It's basically a quick proxy, so Grafana can still read the data from all the Prometheus and sees it as one API. There is a question that often comes up, is that why we decided to run the Prometheus on the control plane and not the tenant cluster. There is no real technical reason why we did this, but we thought it's better because A, we don't disrupt the workload clusters, and B, the customer doesn't see that and won't try to use our Prometheus, won't ask questions. So It's just easier for us to have it on the control plane. But this could change. There is no hard reason for that. Next is a quick run through the components we're having in the new setup. So one component we've been mainly dealing with and building is the Prometheus meta operator. It's basically an operator that watch every cluster. So when I say cluster CR here, it means AWS config, Azure config, KVM config, but also all the new CAPI cluster CR. So we just watch all of this and produce all the resources needed to run a Prometheus server. So this includes the Prometheus CR, the config for the server, how we configure the alert manager for the routing and everything. Also all the alerts that should be in this cluster, in this server. We also configure the Opsgenie heartbeat automatically with this. And we set up the VPS CR that help us define the request and limit for the server. And given all these resources, then you have the Prometheus operator, which is reconciling mainly the CR, and there's a link between all those resources, direct or indirect. And basically the Prometheus operator sets up the Prometheus server and configures it. Then additionally to that, we are using vertical pod autoscaler to, as I said, to set the request and limit for the Prometheus server. This is very helpful because every cluster is different in terms of size and means we are not ingesting the same amount of metric for each cluster. And this varies a lot. And vertical pod autoscaler is able to compute the right amount of memory in CPU each Prometheus should use. So this really helps with vertical scaling. And the last component is Promzy, which is this quick proxy, but this should be transparent for everyone. It just basically connects to all the Prometheuses and proxy the PromQL request to all of them. So when you make a query to Promzy, it's like you're asking, it feels like you're asking the all Prometheus, like you're asking only one, but you're in fact talking to all of them, which is very handy. So yeah, this covers most of the component. There are others, but it's the most important part. Future work, yeah, we planning to also have high availability for alert manager because Prometheus operator knows how to do that and we could just benefit from it. So that's on our list. We're currently in the process of migrating team alerts from the old to the new setup. And what's left is, yeah, we also want to improve the way alerts are routed in Alert Manager because we've just been adding on that over time and we think it's a bit messy and could use some refactoring. So there's room for improvement there. Is there any questions?
Yeah, I missed the beginning, so maybe that was already answered. But now to add a new rule or edit new rule, we have to make a change to Prometheus meta operator. Is that correct?
Currently, yes.
Is it going to change?
Is this going to change? I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, because you said currently.
Yeah, currently, yeah, that's the state.
Okay.
Yeah, we also have a story now to maybe move that to the different apps, but how we can do this is still not clear, so we still need to discuss that internally or in Atlas.
So, long story short, if I want to add alert, I don't go to JDS Prometheus. I just go to Prometheus meta operator and do more or less the same thing.
Yes, exactly. And we try to keep the structure when we moved alert, so it's like the same directory, same file names, stuff should be ordered the same.
Mhm.
There's few changes, but they're minor.
So what happens when I do opctl open Prometheus?
Oh yeah, I can demo that actually. So yeah, because we now have multiple Prometheus, I can quickly show that we added a flag to opctl, and you can pass the tenant cluster ID. And when I open this, if you look at the URL, you have a prefix here, which is the cluster ID basically. And this means this Prometheus is only talking to this cluster. So we have
Right.
multiple of them.
And how to use Prometheus?
You don't really use it. You go through Grafana, and Grafana does it for you.
Okay, so there is no way to have a Prometheus interface which is using Prometheus behind the scene.
No, not really.
Okay. And then the last question I have, like, that's just out of curiosity, if this would be possible to have a global Prometheus and then a global Grafana?
What do you mean by global? Because we have a Prometheus per installation, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. And global, I mean something that would be able to access all installations.
That was my last hackathon project. Or the one before. We did this.
Is that so? This is possible, not super
Yeah.
useful.
Yeah.
Okay.
There were
So like-
some.
Sorry.
Yeah, go. You did.
So that global one like queries all the installation level ones, which then queries like all the Prometheus servers. It's not super there yet because it's kind of bending what Prometheus is built for a little bit. But we've had some patches upstream for improving that over time.
Okay.
One question for me: does the global, the old-fashioned Prometheus still exist, or is it gone already?
Yeah, it still exists. We're still in the transition phase. We have to move alerts, and we're not killing it yet, but hopefully soon.
Okay. One more question around not adding alerts, but adding new scrape targets. Does it work the same now? I mean, you have to alter Prometheus meta operator to include new scraping targets, or how does it work?
So what we've been doing is that because the way we discover the targets for all our components is a bit funky, we added all of them manually, but there is a way to automatically add a scraping target and not having to modify the Prometheus config. There is something called a service monitor, and we're not using that right now, but we're aiming there. But currently there is something for managed apps where based on some labels, we just discover the service, and if you have the right label on your service resource, it will be scraped by Prometheus.
Okay, so you actually almost answered my next question, which was specifically about service monitors and support for them. So because you said that you want to transfer your own alerts and alerting rules into CR objects, so I get that these are going to be the standard Prometheus operator objects like service monitor, right?
Yes, exactly.
When you do that, this is something I was asking Joe already quite some time ago, but when you do that, will it be also possible to create service monitor CRs on workload clusters?
Can we do this?
So not currently, right? Because the
Yeah.
Prometheus operates on the management cluster.
Yeah.
We have a story for like how do we enable it on workload clusters for that kind of more style of scraping stuff there via service
Okay.
monitors. That's why it's a bit funny.
Yeah.
Sure. So currently, like just two use cases. First one, we add a new app on a control plane and we want to monitor it. We can do service monitor CR, right? Because it's the same cluster, or not? I
What do you
assume
mean?
control plane has its own Prometheus server instance, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So assuming we run a new app on the control plane, like we are thinking about running Flux, for example, right now, we can create a service monitor like the standard one included in Flux, and this should work. Am I right?
Currently, Service Monitor won't work.
Even for the local cluster?
Yes.
Okay.
Currently, it's not working.
Okay. So right now, we still use the same interface as previously. We labeled the service, and this should be picked up.
Yes.
Even from workload clusters.
Yes.
Okay.
We try to treat all the clusters the same. We have very little differentiation for control plane because it's control plane. There's some different stuff, but it's
just FYI. You might be very well aware of this, but we're seeing like the service monitor and other Prometheus operator CRs becoming like the de facto standard. More and more upstream projects just include them, and it would be super useful for us to have them because we can just like switch one option in Helm chart, and they will be generated right away because they are already included in the package.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So
we tried to go with this solution at the beginning, but then because we have so many corner cases with the current component, we say we put this on hold for now. We go with the old trade config, and we'll come back to this later.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Yeah. So, is there any like aggregated data in this control plane Prometheus, or only in this Grafana, this central Prometheus? For example, if I want to query, I don't know, not running pods across all the tenant clusters, can I do this now?
You could do this in the Grafana. Yeah, you would have, because you have the data from all the Prometheus for all the clusters, then you can ask this, yes.
Okay.
Wait, just out of curiosity, if I want to do, like, how smart is Proxy is my question. Like, if I want to do a query that does an aggregate, like an average, over a metric that is available on all workload clusters, will this work?
I think yes. Prometheus is not very smart. It just fans out the query to all of them, right? And
okay, so it won't work. Like if I want to get the like what Vol was asking, the number of all pods, sum over all pods that are in not running state over
it does
all
this.
workload clusters.
It does this. That's kind of the whole point of it. Is that so it'll treat like the configured downstream Prometheus CRs as like remote read targets. Right. So it's essentially a Prometheus server that treats every other Prometheus server as like a downstream target. It'll fan out so if you had like some foo bar, it'll fan everything out, get all the foo bars, and then sum them.
Yeah, that's the point. So it runs the aggregation logic over all the data sources.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty neat.
Cool. Sorry, because I had an impression that Promzy was written by you. I mean, it is.
No.
It's not.
It's some open source project.
Yeah, okay. I was pretty sure it is.
We did some patches. There was, when we were doing the hackathon, I think me and Quentin had like 2 or 3 patches running on it. But it's some guy called, I think his name's Jackson. It's some guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Because I was kind of expecting that it won't work because you need to run aggregation in Promzy, but if it works, very nice. Okay, so one more question. Alert Manager. Because, again, just for now, still out of curiosity, Loki for logs is API compatible with Alert Manager. So when we run Loki, there's like, there's an alerting, there are alerting rules for Prometheus. You can write the same style of alerting rules just over logs in Loki. And this is API compatible with Alert Manager.
Okay.
I wonder how this fits, like just in general, if it fits at all, how to reuse alert managers. Are they open? Like, if you will scale them, will there be like an alert manager cluster per control plane? Something like that?
If you're talking about HA Alert Manager, right?
Yeah.
If we do this, then we just have 3 pods running Alert Manager, and they make a quorum and they work together, right?
But it's a single instance running
yes,
on the control
yes,
plane.
Yes.
Okay, so
Single
it should be
instance.
totally possible to reuse it and use the
Exactly.
same alert
You should
manager.
just be able to connect locally to Alert Manager, and then it would send alerts, and it will get notified. Should work, yeah.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
Nice. More questions? If not, then we can call it here, I guess.